Hello everyone, I'm David Sotmayer Machado, and today we're going to talk about something we all experience, whether we like it or not: conflict. Conflict is one of those things that most of us try to avoid, but the reality is it's an unavoidable part of life. It happens in friendships, families, relationships, workplaces, and even within ourselves. But here's the big question: is conflict always bad? Most of the time we think of conflict as something negative, something stressful, destructive, or something that needs to be avoided at all costs. But conflict isn't just about arguing or fighting. Conflict can also be a sign of progress, of different perspectives being shared, or change happening. It can be an opportunity for growth, learning, and even strengthening relationships if we know about conflict and how to handle it correctly. Now, before we go further, take a moment to reflect on this. Do you think conflict is always a bad thing? Or can it sometimes be necessary or beneficial? Think about a recent disagreement you had with someone. What was the real issue behind it? Was it truly about the topic you were arguing over, or was there something deeper? Have you ever won a conflict but later felt like you actually lost something? Like a friendship, trust, or respect? Now let's talk about an example. Imagine you and a friend are ordering pizza. You want pineapple on it, and they think that's a crime against humanity. Congratulations, you're in a conflict here. At a first glance, this may seem like a small and meaningless dispute, but take a closer look. Your argument isn't just about pizza. It could be about personal preferences, cultural influences, or even past experiences with food. And if you think that's a small conflict, wait until it's the last slice. Suddenly, what seemed like a simple disagreement becomes a real competition over resources. But what if instead of turning this into an argument about who's right and who's wrong, you focus on resolving the issue? Maybe you order half and half. Maybe one of you decides to compromise. The way we approach conflict determines whether it strengthens or weakens our relationships. In today's session, we'll explore how to deal with conflict in a productive way, how to recognize it, understand it, and most importantly, how to resolve it in a way that leads to a better outcome for everyone involved. So, as we move forward, keeping this in mind, conflict itself isn't a problem. It's how we handle it and make it all the difference. So let's look at the definition of conflict, okay? Now that we've acknowledged that conflict is a natural part of life, let's take a moment to define what it actually is. The word conflict often brings up images of heated arguments, loud debates, or even full-blown fights. But conflict isn't always loud. It doesn't have to be a dramatic showdown or an explosive argument. It can be something as small as an awkward silence between two colleagues who disagree on how to do something, or the tension in a family when one person avoids bringing up a certain topic to keep the peace. So, what is conflict? Simply put, conflict is a disagreement or clash between individuals or groups arising from differences in beliefs, values, goals, or interests. Conflict can be personal, organizational, or societal. It can manifest in different ways, though: emotional disputes, communication breakdowns, or even competition for resources. So let's take a moment to break that down. Conflict is about differences. Different values, different goals, different needs, or different perspectives. It can happen between individuals, within groups, or even inside our own minds. It isn't necessarily about arguing or fighting. It can be silent, passive, or even internal. Now let's reflect on how these conflicts show up in different situations. Have you ever had a moment where you felt strongly about something, but someone else had the complete opposite opinion? What did that feel like? Have you ever had a disagreement where afterwards you realized that both sides actually wanted the same thing but were just approaching it differently? Think of a time when you were in a conflict with yourself, maybe torn between two decisions. How did you handle it? Here's a key point to consider. Conflict isn't good or bad, it's neutral. It's how we handle it that determines whether it becomes destructive or constructive. Let me give you an example. Two co-workers are assigned to work on a project together. One person believes in planning every detail in advance, while the other prefers a more flexible, go with the flow approach. There is no wrong way to work, but their differences might lead to misunderstandings and frustration. If they don't address it, resentment can build up and their teamwork will suffer. But if they recognize that they both bring valuable skills to the table and find a way to compromise, their collaboration could actually become stronger. Conflict can sometimes push people apart, but it can also be the spark for innovation, problem solving, and growth, if we know how to approach it properly. So, as we continue exploring this topic, I want you to start thinking about the conflicts in your life. Are they being handled in a way that's constructive, or are they causing unnecessary stress? And most importantly, what can you do differently to turn conflict into an opportunity rather than a problem? So now that we have a clear definition of what conflict is, let's take a closer look at the different types of conflict, okay? Not all conflicts are the same. Some happen inside our own minds, while others involve multiple people or entire groups. Understanding the type of conflict you're dealing with is essential because different types require different resolution strategies. So we can classify conflicts into these four main categories. Interpersonal conflict, so it's the conflict within. This is the type of conflict that happens inside your own head. It's the internal struggle between two competing thoughts, emotions, or desires. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to make a difficult decision and no matter which option you choose, it felt like you were giving something up? That's interpersonal conflict. For example, deciding whether to accept a new job offer that pays more but requires longer hours, debating whether to confront a friend with something that's bothering you or let it go, struggling between what's right and what's easy, like choosing between going to the gym or staying in bed. So, when was the last time you experienced an internal conflict? What made it difficult? How do you usually resolve these types of inner struggles? While it may seem like these conflicts don't affect others, the way we handle them can have a big impact on our relationships and decisions. What about the interpersonal conflicts? This is the classical disagreement. This is the most common type of conflict, one person versus another. It happens between individuals due to differences in perspectives, personalities, values, or communication styles. Think about all the little conflicts that pop up in daily life. A disagreement with a friend over where to eat, a co-worker who has a different approach to work than you do, a family member who never respects your personal space. So these conflicts can be minor and quickly resolved, or they can escalate into bigger issues if not addressed properly. Take a moment to reflect. What's a recent interpersonal conflict you've experienced? What was the underlying cause? Was it miscommunication, personality differences, something deeper? The key to resolving interpersonal conflict is communication. If we take time to understand the other person's point of view, many conflicts can be prevented or quickly solved. Now, the intergroup conflict, it's what builds team tension. So intergroup conflicts happens within a team or a group of people working towards a shared goal. This could be a workplace team, a sports team, or even a group of friends planning a trip together. When people have different ideas, work styles, or expectations, conflicts can arise. Common causes of intergroup conflict include disagreements on how tasks should be completed, unequal distribution of work, one person does all the work while others do nothing, and differences in priorities or leading struggles. We've all been in situations where teamwork didn't go as smoothly as planned for sure. Maybe someone took control of a project without listening to others, or maybe a group couldn't agree on a decision and end up stuck on endless debates. So reflect on this. Have you ever been in a group where conflict made things worse? What caused it? Have you ever been in a group where conflict actually improved the outcome? So what made the difference? The key to handling intergroup conflict is ensuring that everyone feels heard and valued. When managed properly, these conflicts can lead to stronger teamwork and better results. What about the intergroup conflict, when groups clash? So finally, intergroup conflicts occurs between different groups, teams, or organizations. These can be between departments in a company, rival businesses, political parties, or even communities with opposing viewpoints. Some common examples may include two departments in a company blaming each other for a failed project, rival companies competing for the same market share, or political parties opposing each other's policies. Intergroup conflict often stems from competition for resources, power struggles, or deep-rooted ideological differences. This type of conflicts can be particularly challenging because they involve group dynamics, biases, and sometimes even historical tensions. So reflect on this. Have you ever been part of a team versus team conflict? How did it affect group morale? What strategies do you think could help different groups work together instead of competing? Intergroup conflicts can be destructive, but they can also lead to innovation and progress when handled properly. The key is to find common ground and work toward a shared goal rather than getting caught up in a win-lose mindset. Now that we've explored these four types of conflict, I want you to think about how they apply to your own experiences. Conflict is everywhere, but when we understand what type of conflict we're dealing with, we can take the right approach to resolve it. So, which type of conflict do you experience most often? And what steps can you take to handle it more effectively? As we move forward, we will explore how to turn conflict into an opportunity for growth and collaboration than letting it become a source of stress and division. Okay? So, let's take a look at the sources of conflict. Now that we've explored different types of conflict, we're going to talk about why conflict happens in the first place. Conflict doesn't just appear out of nowhere, it has underlying causes. When we understand the root cause of a conflict, we have a much better chance of resolving it effectively. There are several common sources of conflict, and today we're going to focus on four major ones. First, differences in values and beliefs. We all come from different backgrounds, cultures, and life experiences which shape the way we see the world. Our values and beliefs influence our decisions, behaviors, and how we interact with others. When two people or groups have fundamentally different values, conflict can arise. For example, a workplace disagreement about ethical business practices. Should a company prioritize profits over social responsibility? A family argument where over differing political views at the dinner table. A disagreement between friends about moral issues like whether it's okay to break small rules if no one gets hurt. So think about this. Have you ever had a disagreement with someone because of different values or beliefs? How did you handle it? Were you able to find common ground? Understanding that people come from different perspectives can help us approach conflicts with more empathy. Instead of trying to win the argument, we can focus on understanding why the other person feels the way they do. Now, resource scarcity. So, competing for limited resources. Another common cause of conflict is competition for limited resources, whether it's money, time, opportunities, or even attention. When there's not enough of something to go around, people naturally start to compete for it, and this can lead to conflict. Some examples may include two co-workers competing for a promotion or a raise, a disagreement about siblings who gets to use the car, countries in political conflicts over land or natural resources. So reflect on this. Have you ever been in a situation where you felt like you had to fight for resources? How did that competition impact your relationship with others? Resource-related conflicts can be particularly challenging because people often feel like they have no choice but to win in order to get what they need. However, collaboration and negotiation can sometimes lead to better outcomes than direct competition. Now, miscommunication, the root of many conflicts. How many times have you been in a conflict that started because of a misunderstanding? Miscommunication is one of the most common sources of conflict. It happens when messages are unclear, when people assume things without clarification, or when emotions distort the way we interpret what's being said. So consider these situations. A text message that was meant as a joke but was taken as an insult. A workplace email that was too vague, leading to confusion about responsibilities. Or a conversation where no one person was upset but didn't express it, leading to frustration from the other person. Now think about your own experiences. Have you ever had a conflict that was entirely based on a misunderstanding? How could better communication have prevented or resolved it? The best way to prevent miscommunication conflicts is through active listening, asking for clarification, and making sure your own messages are clear. Small efforts in communication can make a big difference in avoiding unnecessary disputes. Finally, personality clashes, when people just don't get along. Well, sometimes conflicts happen simply because two people have very different personalities. One person might be very detail oriented and structured, while other prefers a more flexible and spontaneous approach. One might be highly assertive while the other is more reserved. These differences can lead to misunderstandings, frustration, and if not handled well, long-term tension. Examples of some personality clashes may include a quiet, introverted employee feeling overwhelmed by a loud, extroverted worker. A direct and blunt person unintentionally offending someone who is more sensitive, or a boss who values strict schedules clashing with an employee who prefers flexibility. Reflect on this. Have you ever had conflict with someone simply because your personalities were different? And what helped or could have helped resolve that tension? Personality differences don't have to lead to conflict. When people acknowledge their differences and learn how to work together, they can actually complement each other. Now that we've explored the main sources of conflict, take a moment to reflect on your own experiences. Which of these sources of conflict do you encounter most often in your personal or professional life? How can understanding these causes help you manage conflict more effectively in the future? As we move forward in this session, we'll start looking at the best ways to resolve conflict and how to turn these challenges into opportunities for collaboration and growth. So let's talk about conflict resolution. Now that we've explored the different types and sources of conflict, it's time to talk about something crucial: how to resolve it. The big question is, does avoiding conflict mean it's solved? Many people think that if they ignore a problem, it will go away on its own. But most of the time, that's not the case. Imagine you have a small leak in your roof. You can pretend it's not there for a while, but eventually the water damage will get worse, and fixing it will be even more difficult and expensive. So conflict works just the same way. The longer we avoid it, the worse it usually gets. But does that mean we should jump into every conflict prepared for a battle? Absolutely not. The key is knowing when and how to engage in conflict resolution. Let's reflect for a moment. Can walking away from a conflict ever be a good solution? When and why? Have you ever avoided a conflict only for it to come back later in a worse way? What strategies do you use when approaching conflicts? Do they actually work? There's no single right way to resolve conflict, but there are certain principles that make conflict resolution more effective. Let's explore a few of them. Address conflict earlier. The sooner you deal with a conflict, the easier it is to resolve. Small disagreements can grow into big problems if they're ignored. Stay calm and manage emotions. Reacting with anger or frustration can easily escalate this situation. Instead, take a step back and try to respond with a clear mind. Focus on the issue, never on the person. It's easy to blame someone when there's conflict, but attacking the person instead of discussing the problem rarely leads to a good resolution. Listen and acknowledge. Sometimes conflicts arise because people don't feel heard. Taking the time to listen can go a long way in resolving tension. Find common ground. Even in the most heated conflicts, there is often some shared interest or goal. Identifying these can help shift the focus towards solutions instead of arguments. Now let's consider a scenario. Imagine two co-workers, Sarah and James, are working on a project together. James wants to stick to the original plan while Sarah wants to make some last-minute changes. Instead of discussing it, they both start avoiding each other. What do you think will happen? Most likely the project will suffer and both will feel frustrated, right? But what if they sat down, listened to each other's concerns, and found some compromise? The result would likely be a stronger project and a better working relationship. The way we approach conflict resolutions can either build stronger connections or create lasting divisions. As we move forward, think about how you currently handle conflict and what changes you might need to make to approach it more effectively. Okay? Now that we understand the importance of resolving conflicts rather than avoiding them, let's talk about the different ways we can approach conflict resolution. There is no one-size-fits-all solution. Each situation is unique, and the method we choose depends on the context, the people involved, and the desired outcome. So here are the 5 approaches to resolving a conflict. Negotiation, finding a middle ground. So negotiation is when two or more parties discuss their differences and attempt to reach a mutually acceptable agreement. This approach requires both sides to be willing to compromise and works towards a fair outcome. For example, two co-workers negotiating project deadlines to accommodate both of their schedules. A customer and a business negotiating a refund or store credit after a dispute over a product. So, on your own cases, have you ever been in a situation where negotiation worked well to resolve a conflict? What do you think makes a good negotiator? Now let's take a look at mediation that we will focus mostly on this presentation. So a neutral third party helps. Mediation involves a neutral third party who facilitates discussion between conflicting parties. The mediator does not impose a decision, but help guide the conversation towards a resolution that works for everyone involved. For example, a workplace conflict between two employees is mediated by HR, or a couple going through a divorce uses a mediator to reach a fair settlement. On your own experience, have you ever had a conflict where a third party helped resolve the issue? How did it go? What qualities do you think a good mediator should have? Okay, another method is arbitration. So the third party actually makes the final decision. In arbitration, a neutral third party listens to both sides and then makes a final decision. Unlike mediation, arbitration is usually binding, meaning both parties must accept the outcome. For example, a dispute between an employer and an employee over a contract that is settled by an arbitrator. A disagreement between two businesses that is resolved through commercial arbitration. Reflect on this. Have you ever been in a situation where someone else had to make a final decision for you? How do you think arbitration differs from mediation in terms of fairness? Now, collaboration. It's usually the win-win solution. Collaboration focuses on finding a solution that benefits everyone. This approach takes time and effort, but often leads to the best long-term outcomes, as it builds trust and cooperation. For example, two departments in a company working together to develop a new strategy that satisfies both teams. Family members discussing and agreeing on a fair way to share household responsibilities. Have you ever experienced a conflict where collaboration led to a positive outcome? What makes collaboration difficult in some situations? Okay. So, in conflict resolution, let's focus now on communication. We've talked about different ways to resolve conflicts, but there's one critical skill that plays a role in every single method: communication. The way we communicate can either help us resolve conflicts or it can even make them worse. Have you ever been in an argument where the problem wasn't really what was said but how it was said? Maybe the other person was too aggressive, or maybe you felt like they weren't really listening to you. So communication is much more than just words. It's how we express ourselves, how we listen, and how we interpret what others say. So let's explore four key pillars of effective communication in a conflict resolution, okay? Clear expression, say what you mean. One of the biggest causes of conflict is miscommunication. Sometimes we assume others understand what we mean, but if we're not clear in our words, misunderstandings happen. People aren't mind readers, so if we don't express ourselves clearly, frustration builds. For example, instead of saying, "You never help me," try, "I feel overwhelmed when I have to do everything alone." Instead of saying, "This isn't fair," be more specific. "I feel like I didn't have a say in this situation, and I'd like to discuss it." So, have you ever been in a situation where unclear communication led to a conflict? And how do you think you could improve the way you express yourselves in difficult conversations? Now, active listening. Really hear the other person. Listening isn't just about waiting for your turn to speak up. Active listening means truly paying attention to what the other person is saying, without interrupting or formulating your response while they're talking. Ways to show active listening: nodding or giving small verbal acknowledgements like "I see," "That makes sense." Well, try to avoid okay? Paraphrasing what they said to confirm understanding. So, what I'm hearing is that you feel frustrated because... Asking open-ended questions. Can you tell me more about why you feel that way? Okay, reflect on your own reality. Think about the last argument you had. Were you really listening, or were you just waiting to fight back? How do you feel when someone genuinely listens to you? How can you give that same experience to others? So, about nonverbal cues, is the communication without words. Did you know that over half of our communication is nonverbal? Our tone of voice, facial expressions, and body language can say more than words ever could. For example, crossing your arms while saying, "I'm fine," sends a completely different message than saying with a relaxed posture and a smile, so "I'm fine." Rolling your eyes, sighing, or avoiding eye contact can make someone feel dismissed or disrespected. Nonverbal communication is especially important in conflict resolution because emotions run high. If your body language contradicts your words, people will believe your body language, not your words. So reflect on this. Have you ever been in a conversation where nonverbal signals made the situation worse? What can you do to be more aware of your own nonverbal communication in difficult discussions? Finally, openness and honesty. This creates a safe space for dialogue. People are more likely to engage in productive conflict resolution when they feel safe expressing themselves. If someone fears judgment, anger, or dismissal, They may shut down or become defensive. To create an open and honest conversation, avoid blaming and accusations, focus on the issue, not the person. Always the issue, never the person. Be honest about your own feelings and perspectives without exaggerating. And be willing to admit when you're wrong or when you've misunderstood something. So reflect. Have you ever felt like you couldn't speak honestly in a conflict? What made it difficult? How can you encourage more open and honest discussions in your own life? So, at the heart of conflict resolution is communication. Whether it's negotiating, mediating, or collaborating, the way we express ourselves and listen to others determines whether we solve the problems or even make it worse. As we move forward, think about how you communicate during conflicts. Are these areas where you could improve? Small changes in how we speak, listen, and interpret non-verbal cues can make a huge difference in resolving conflicts effectively. Now that we've explored different conflict resolution methods, let's focus on one of the most effective approaches, mediation. Mediation is a process where a neutral third party, and I stress out neutral here, called a mediator, helps two or more people in a conflict reach a mutually acceptable solution. So, unlike negotiation, where the involved parties work things out on their own, or arbitration, where a third party makes a binding decision, mediation is about facilitation. The mediator doesn't take sides, offer solutions, or make judgments. Instead, they guide the discussion, helping both sides communicate more effectively and find common ground. So, why is mediation such an effective tool for conflict resolution? Well, because it promotes collaboration instead of one part winning and the other losing. Mediation encourages both sides to work together to find a resolution. Confidentiality. Unlike public court cases or workplace disputes that involve multiple people, mediation is a private process allowing participants to speak freely. There's control about outcomes. Since the mediator doesn't make decisions, the involved parties retain control over their final resolution. And relationship preservation. Mediation helps to repair and maintain relationships by fostering mutual understanding. So think about this. Have you ever witnessed or participated in a mediation process? How did it go? How do you think mediation differs from just having a friend mediate a dispute? Mediation is used in a wide range of settings. The workplace disputes, conflicts between employers and employees and management, legal and family conflicts, so divorce settlements, child custody discussions, or business disagreements, and community disputes, neighbors disagreeing over property lines or noise complaints. Mediation can be formal or informal. Sometimes a professional mediator is brought in, but in everyday life, we also act as informal mediators between friends, family members, co-workers. Have you ever helped two people settle a disagreement by listening to both sides and encouraging a fair solution? That's informal mediation in action. Now let's take a moment to reflect. Can you think of a situation where mediation might have worked better than direct negotiation or arbitration? What qualities do you think a good mediator should have? As we move forward, we'll explore what exactly a mediator does and the steps involved in the mediation process. So let's talk about the process itself. Imagine this. Two co-workers are in a heated argument and one says, "You're impossible to work with." The other shouts back, "Oh yeah? Well, you never listen." Then they both go back to work like nothing happened. Does that mean the conflict is resolved? Of course not. The issue is still there, slimmering under the surface, and at some point, maybe tomorrow, next week, or even months later, it will come back. Sometimes even worse than before. This is why mediation follows a structured process, a step-by-step approach that ensures both sides are heard, the real issues are addressed, and a fair resolution is reached. So let's go through these steps one by one, okay? There are 5 key steps in mediation process. Mediation isn't just about having a conversation and hoping for the best. It follows these 5 structured steps. Preparation. So this covers setting the ground rules. Opening statements. So each side presents their perspective. Joint discussion. So the mediator facilitates dialogue. And private sessions if necessary. Confidential discussions with the mediator. Finally, negotiating and resolution. Finding a solution that works for everyone. Each of these steps plays a crucial role in guiding people from conflict to resolution, so let's break them down one by one. Preparation, setting the ground rules. Before mediation even starts, a few things need to be established. The mediator rule here is to ensure both parties agree to mediate voluntarily, set ground rules such as no interruptions and respectful language, explain that mediation is confidential, what's said in mediation stays in mediation, and create a neutral and safe space for discussion. Think of this as setting up the rules of a game. If there are no rules, things can quickly spiral out of control. Now reflect here. Think about a time when a conflict got out of hand because there were no clear rules or structure. How might setting expectations from the beginning have changed the outcome? Okay, now let's go into opening statements where it's all about letting each side speak, okay? So once the process begins, both parties get a chance to explain their perspective. Each side is encouraged to share what the issue is from their point of view, how they feel about the situation, and what outcome they are hoping for. The key rule here is no interruptions. Each person gets to speak without being cut off, judged, or dismissed. So why is this important? Because many conflicts escalate simply because one or both sides feels like they're not being heard. Sometimes, just letting someone fully express themselves already helps to lower the tension. Now, think about a time when you were in a disagreement but didn't feel like you had the chance to fully explain yourself. How did that affect your emotions? How would it have changed if you were given the time to speak without being interrupted? Now, let's cover joint discussion, okay? So, it's where the conversation actually begins, which is in fact the tricky part here. So, the mediator's job is to facilitate a structured, productive conversation by helping both sides ask clarifying questions instead of making assumptions, express their thoughts without attacking the other person, and work towards understanding each other's needs. This is where the real work happens. The mediator ensures that the conversation remains focused and respectful and doesn't turn into a shouting match, okay? Is that one scenario? In a bad discussion, you never listen to me leads to escalation. In a mediated discussion, what can we do to improve communication? This builds up into a constructive conversation, okay? So think about the last disagreement you had. Was it a productive conversation or did it become a blame game? How would the discussion have been different if it were structured like a mediation session? Now, in private sessions that may be optional, it's about digging deeper, okay? Sometimes people hold back in front of the others. They may feel uncomfortable expressing certain thoughts or emotions openly. So this is why the mediators may hold private, one-on-one sessions with each party. In private sessions, the mediator can ask, what's really bothering you? What outcome would you be willing to accept? Are there any personal concerns you're not comfortable sharing openly? This step helps mediators uncover hidden issues that may not come up in joint discussions. For example, An employee is upset about the workplace conflict, but the real issue is that they feel undervalued. Or a team member resists a decision, but deep down they're afraid of failing. Mediators help people recognize the root of conflict, not just the surface level argument. To reflect, have you ever realized that a conflict was actually about something deeper than what was being argued about? What was the real issue underneath? Finally, negotiation and resolution. So, this is about finding the best outcome. This doesn't mean one side wins and the other loses. The goal is to reach a resolution that respects both parties, addresses key concerns, and prevents future conflicts. At this stage, the mediator helps both sides explore different options, compromise where necessary, and agree on a clear and fair resolution. Once an agreement is reached, it's often written down so both parties are accountable for the following through. Example, two employees arguing over workload work together to redistribute tasks fairly. Or a landlord and a tenant negotiate new lease terms that benefit both. Mediators help ensure the resolution is practical, fair, and lasting. So think about the time when you had to compromise. Did it feel like a fair resolution? What made it work or not work? So finally, or concluding, why does mediation works? First, preparation, you're setting ground rules, opening statements, letting both sides express themselves, joint discussion facilitating understanding, private sessions digging deeper into the real issues, and negotiation and resolution is about finding a fair and lasting solution. Okay? At its core, mediation is about guiding people towards solution, but it only works when both sides are willing to engage, listen, and compromise. A well-structured mediation process ensures that conflicts are not just patched up, but actually resolved in a meaningful way. So the final thought here is conflict doesn't just disappear. It needs to be handled, navigated, and resolved. Mediation provides a clear, fair, and structured way to do just that. So what are the benefits of mediation here? Okay, let's think about this. Why not just fight it out? Let's be honest. When people are in conflict, they often think of three easy solutions. Let's just argue until one of us gives up. Why not go straight to court and let a judge decide? Or I'll just ignore this person forever. But do these solutions really solve anything? Arguing usually makes things worse. Going to court, it's expensive and time consuming. Ignoring the problem, well, it doesn't go away, it just gets worse over time. Okay? So that's why mediation is such a powerful alternative. It's not just about being nice, it's about finding smart, efficient, and fair solutions to the problems. Today, we are going to explore exactly why mediation works and why it's often the best choice for resolving conflict. There are 5 key benefits of mediation here. Mediation is more than just talking things out. It provides a real practical advantages over other ways of handling conflicts. The first one, it's cost effective, so it saves money compared to legal battles. It's time saving as well, bringing faster resolution than formal processes. It preserves relationships as it encourages collaboration instead of division. It's confidential, keeps disputes private, avoiding public scrutiny. And it encourages fair solutions. It allows both sides to have control over the outcome. Now let's break down each of these benefits. The first, mediation is cost effective, saving money instead of spending it. So what about money? Legal disputes are expensive. Hiring lawyers, really expensive. Going to court, way too much expensive, okay? So court cases can drag on for months or even years, and legal fees pile up quickly. Mediation, on the other hand, is much cheaper because there are no costly court fees. It can be resolved in a few sessions instead of months or years, and it's focused on solutions, not legal battles. For example, a business dispute between two companies could cost hundreds of thousands of dollars in court, but through mediation, a few structured discussions can solve the issues at a fraction of the cost. So, have you ever seen someone waste money on a conflict that could have been handled more efficiently? What could have been done differently? Now, about saving time. Time is money and legal battles waste both. So some lawsuits take years to resolve. HR investigations drag on for months. Workplace disputes linger and affect productivity. Mediation, on the other hand, is fast. It can take days or weeks instead of months or years. It's flexible. Sessions can be scheduled at convenient times. It's focused on resolution. There's no waiting for court dates or bureaucratic delays. For example, a workplace conflict that takes 6 or more months through formal HR processes, or a mediation process that resolves the issues in just a few sessions. Which one sounds better? Well, have you ever been stuck in a dispute that took way too longer than it should have? How would your mediation have changed that timeline? Okay? Now about preserving the relationships. This is where conflict goes on without burning bridges, okay? Conflict, when handled badly, can destroy relationships, friendships, and over unresolved issues. Family members can stop talking for years. Employees quit their jobs because of workplace drama. But mediation helps avoid this by encouraging respectful communications instead of blame, helping both sides understand each other's needs, and supporting future collaboration instead of permanent division. For example, two business partners have a serious disagreement. If they go to court, the partnership is ruined forever. If they go to mediation, they can find a solution and keep working together. Mediation allows people to walk away with the respect instead of resentment. So, have you ever lost a friendship or a work relationship over a conflict? Could mediation have helped prevent that outcome? Finally, confidentiality, okay? No public drama, no reputation damage here. One of the biggest fears people have in conflict is public embarrassment. Court cases lead to public records, okay? HR investigation leads to gossip spreading through the organization. Social media arguments, your drama is out there for everyone to see, okay? Mediation, on the other hand, is completely private. There's no public exposure. Confidential. What's said in mediation stays in mediation. And it's safe. It encourages open and honest discussion. Examples here. A company dispute resolved through mediation means no public scandal or reputation damage. A family inheritance disagreement mediated privately avoids unnecessary family tension. Okay? Now reflect. Would you rather solve a conflict privately or have the world watching? How does confidentiality impact the willingness to resolve a dispute? So, let's summarize why mediation is so effective. It saves money, it saves time, it preserves relationships, and it's confidential. Okay? Now let's take a look on the challenges on the other hand. So, is mediation always the magic fix? So far, we've talked about all the great things mediation can do, how it saves time, money, and relationships. But let's be real, mediation isn't a magic spell that instantly makes people agree. Sometimes, mediation works beautifully. Other times, it's like trying to make two stubborn goats share the same hill. Today, we're going to talk about the challenges of mediation, what can go wrong, why it sometimes fails, and how to handle these obstacles. So there are basically top 5 challenges in mediation, okay? Mediation is powerful, but it doesn't always go smoothly. Some conflicts are just complicated. So So the five biggest challenges would be power imbalances, when one party has more control than the other, resistance to collaboration, some people just don't want to compromise, emotional barriers, strong emotions can block logical discussions, lack of commitment, some people agree in mediation but don't follow through, and well, it's not here on the slide, but there's also complex or deep conflicts. Some disputes are too difficult for mediation alone. Let's go through each of these and see how a mediator handles them, okay? About power imbalances, when one side holds all the cards, imagine this. The CEO and an entry-level employee are in mediation over a workplace conflict. So who do you think has more power in that discussion? Is there any doubt? Now picture a landlord and a tenant arguing over rent, or a parent and a child in a family dispute. When one person has more authority, money, or influence, it can make mediation unfair. So some examples of power imbalance: an employee is scared to speak up against their boss, a financially dependent spouse unable to argue freely, or a small business negotiating against a large corporation. So how can a mediator overcome it? A strong mediator ensures both voices are heard. Private sessions can help weaker parties speak freely. And setting clear ground rules prevents intimidation. So have you ever been in a conflict where you felt at a disadvantage? How did it affect your ability to speak up? About resistance to collaboration. It's when people just want to win. Let's be honest, some people don't want a resolution, they want revenge, they want payback, they want control, they want to win. Mediation only works when both sides are willing to cooperate, but if one party refuses to compromise, doesn't believe in mediation, or thinks they're 100% right and won't budge. Example, a divorcing couple where one side just wants to punish the other. Business partners where one refuses to negotiate. So how can the mediator overcome it? A mediator reminds both sides of the benefits of resolution. Reframing the conversation shifts the focus from winning to moving forward. And sometimes it's okay to walk away. Not every conflict can be mediated. Have you ever argued with someone who just refused to see the reason? So how did that feel? Now about emotional barriers when feelings take over. Mediation is supposed to be calm and logical discussion, but sometimes it's anything but calm. One side is furious and won't listen. The other side is too hurt to think clearly. Someone starts crying, yelling, or storming out. For example, a workplace disagreement where one person feels personally attacked instead of just discussing the issue. So, how to overcome it? The mediator needs strong emotional intelligence to keep things on track. Private sessions can help people cool down. If emotions are too raw, postponing mediation might be the best option. So, have you ever tried to have a rational discussion with someone who was just too emotional to talk? Lack of commitment. Sure, we agree, but we won't actually do it. Let's say mediation works, both sides agree on a solution, and then nothing happens. So one side doesn't actually follow through, ignores the agreement, or goes right back to their old behavior. For example, a company agrees to better working conditions, but never actually improves them. Or a couple agrees to better communication but keeps falling into the same old patterns. So how can we overcome it? Mediation agreements should be written down and signed. Follow-up meetings can help ensure action is taken. And sometimes consequences need to be included in the agreement. So have you ever made an agreement that is good in good faith, only for the other person to completely ignore it? Or have you ignored some agreement you made? Finally, some conflicts are just too deep. Mediation is great, but it's not a miracle cure. Some conflicts are just too complex for mediation. Some examples: cases involving serious legal or ethical violations, situations when one party is in danger, long-standing historical or cultural disputes. So, how to handle it? First, recognize when to stop. Mediation isn't always the right tool. If needed, refer the case to legal professionals or authorities. Have you ever seen a conflict that was just too deep to fix with words alone? Okay, so what have we learned today? Mediation is powerful, but it doesn't always work. Power imbalances, resistance, emotion, and commitment issues can all create challenges. Not all conflicts can or should be mediated. Mediation is about guiding people towards solutions. But at the end of the day, the success of mediation depends on the people involved. A great mediator can help, but only if both sides are willing to make it work. So, mediation is like a map. It shows the way to resolution. But if people refuse to take the journey, no amount of guidance will get them there, okay? So, what's the importance of emotional intelligence in conflict resolutions and mediation? Is being right enough to win a conflict? Let's start with some simple question. Have you ever been 100% right in an argument and still lost? Maybe you had all the facts, all the logic, all the evidence on your side, but somehow the other person just got angrier, more defensive, or completely shut down. Why? Because conflict isn't just about logic, it's about emotion. And if you don't understand emotions, yours and others, even the best arguments won't work. This is why emotional intelligence is one of the most important skills in conflict resolution and mediation. Today, we'll break down what emotional intelligence is, why it matters in resolving conflicts, and how can it turn fights into productive conversations. So, why is emotional intelligence the key to conflict resolution? Conflict resolutions and mediation aren't just about who's right, they're about how people feel. And this is where emotional intelligence becomes critical. Emotional intelligence is the ability to recognize your own emotions, control your reactions, understand the emotions of others, and use emotions constructively to resolve conflict. So why does this matter? When emotions take over, logical conversations become impossible. When people feel understood, they are more likely to compromise. And when a mediator can stay calm and neutral, they can de-escalate conflict effectively. So think about a time when emotions, not logic, controlled the conflict. What was the result? Could emotional intelligence have made a difference here? The 5 key components of emotional intelligence in mediation, or there are 5 core elements of emotional intelligence, each one playing a role in helping mediators and conflict resolution specialists handle disputes effectively. Self-awareness, understanding your own emotions. Self-regulation, controlling your reactions. Empathy, understanding how others feel. Social skills, communicating effectively. And motivation, staying committed to resolving conflict. Let's look at each one. Self-awareness, it's understanding your own emotions, so you can't manage conflicts if you don't understand how you're feeling. Self-awareness means recognizing your own emotional triggers, understanding how your mood affects the conversation, knowing when to take a step back to avoid escalating conflict. For example, a mediator realizes that they are feeling frustrated and adjusts their tone before responding. Someone in a conflict notices their anger rising and chooses to take a deep breath instead of shouting. So have you ever looked back at a conflict and realized you were the one escalating it? What would have you done differently now? Self-regulation is controlling your reactions. Once you're aware of your emotions, the next step is controlling them. So self-regulation means staying calm instead of reacting impulsively, avoiding personal attacks in an argument, and knowing when to pause before speaking. For example, a mediator stays calm even when both sides are yelling, or a person in conflict waits before responding instead of saying something that they'll regret. So, was there any time when you wish you had controlled your reactions better in a conflict? Well, I guess most of us would, but think about that for a while. Now, empathy, understanding how others feel. If there's one skill that makes a great mediator, it's empathy. Empathy means seeing the conflict from the other person's perspective, recognizing the emotions behind their words, validating feelings even if you don't agree. For example, a mediator helps an employee and a manager understand each other's stress. A friend realizes that an argument isn't really about the topic, it's about feeling unheard. Without empathy, conflict resolution is just two people waiting for their turn to talk. So think of a time someone really understood how you felt in a conflict. How did that change your conversation? Right? Now, social skills and communicating effectively. Social skills in a conflict resolution include active listening, truly understanding, not just hearing, clear expression, saying what you mean without attacking, and de-escalation techniques, knowing how to calm tense situations. For example, a mediator rephrases an angry statement into a more constructive one. A person uses I statements instead of blaming, so you never listen. Instead, I feel unheard when I try to share my ideas. So, what's one time good communication helped you resolve a conflict? The fifth one is motivation, the willingness to resolve conflict. At the end of the day, conflict resolutions only work if people want to resolve the conflict. Motivation means staying committed to finding a solution, encouraging collaboration instead of competition, and believing that resolution is possible. For example, a mediator keeps both parties focused when they want to give up. A person in conflict chooses to prioritize the relationship over their ego. If people don't want to solve a conflict, even the best techniques won't work. So have you ever had to push through a difficult conflict because you knew it was worth fixing? So bringing all these five emotional intelligence characteristics, bringing them all together. So why is emotional intelligence in the ultimate conflict resolution tool? First, self-awareness, understanding your own emotions. Then, self-regulation, controlling your reactions. Then switch to the other side, and empathy lets you recognize how the others feel. Finally, how do you get to them? Communicate in a way that de-escalates the conflict. So that's where social skills come into play. And finally, none of the other four work if you don't stay committed to finding solutions. Conflict resolution isn't just about winning, it's about understanding. Mediation works best when people feel heard, respected, and valued. Heard, respected, and valued. And that only happens when emotional intelligence is applied. So, final thought, people don't remember what you said in an argument as much as they remember how you made them feel. When we develop emotional intelligence, we don't just resolve conflicts, we create stronger, more understanding relationships. So, going back to self-awareness and self-regulation as a mediator, okay? So, can you mediate if you can't control yourself? Imagine this, you're the mediator in a tense argument. One side is yelling, the other side is frustrated, and then you start to get annoyed too. You roll your eyes, you sigh, Maybe you even snap back at one of them. Boom, mediation failed right here. No more mediation possible. Why? Because you can't stay calm. How can you expect anyone else to? Okay? This is why self-awareness and self-regulation are essential for mediators. If you don't understand and manage your own emotions, you can't effectively help others navigate theirs. In every conflict, emotions run high, but the mediator's job is to stay neutral, even if you feel picking up a side. Always stay neutral. Don't pick sides. Keep calm, even when things start to get really heated. Okay, de-escalate others rather than escalating yourself. Control your reactions, even when someone deeply frustrates you. And that's where these two emotional intelligence skills come in. So self-awareness, recognize your own emotions; self-regulation, control your emotional responses. Together, they help mediators stay composed, focused, and effective. Okay, now let's think a bit about the mediator's mindset here with self-awareness and self-regulation. At the end of the day, a great mediator isn't just skilled in conflict resolution. They are emotionally aware, they know how they feel, they are self-controlled, they don't let emotions dictate their behavior, and they're calm under pressure. They bring stability to chaotic situations. So a mediator power isn't their words, it's in their ability to stay composed when everyone else is losing control. That's why they were called for, okay? Now, what about empathy role in conflict resolution? So, can you solve a conflict without understanding the other person? Let's start with the question. Have you ever been in an argument where the other person clearly wasn't listening to you? You're trying to explain your side and they just keep interrupting, ignoring what you're saying, and preparing their next response instead of actually listening to you. So, how did that feel? Frustrating, right? Now flip that around. Have you ever been so focused on proving you were right that you didn't stop to understand the other person's perspective? If so, don't worry, you're not alone. Because let's be honest, most people listen to reply, not to understand. And that's where empathy changes everything. Conflict resolution isn't just about finding a solution, it's about making sure everyone feels heard, valued, and understood. So, this is where empathy plays a crucial role. Empathy allows us to understand what the other person is coming from, recognize the emotions behind their words, and build trust and connection instead of hostility. So, why does this matter? Without empathy, conflict resolution turns into a battle of who's right. Without empathy, conflicts turn into conversations that lead, with empathy, conflicts turn into conversations that lead to solutions, okay? So, reflect on this. Think about a time when someone truly listened and understood your emotions during a disagreement. Did that change the outcome? There are three ways empathy improves conflict resolution, okay? Empathy plays a role in conflict resolution by building a rapport, means that making people feel safe and respected, facilitating collaboration, encouraging compromise and cooperation, and also diffusing tension, so lowering anger and frustration. Building rapport, making people feel safe and respected, happens when or people feel more willing to engage in conflict resolution if they feel heard, understood, and respected. If someone feels attacked or dismissed, they'll become defensive. And once defensiveness kicks in, resolving the conflict becomes 10 times harder. For example, instead of saying, "That's not true," say, "I see why you feel that way, let's talk about it." Instead of, "You're overreacting," I understand that is important to you. So empathy is the difference between saying calm down, which never works, and I hear you. Let's figure this out together. So think of a time when someone really listened to you in a disagreement. How did that change the conversation? Facilitating collaborations or encouraging compromise and cooperation. Conflicts don't get solved when people dig in their heels and refuse to budge. Empathy helps shift the focus from me versus you into let's solve this together. When people feel understood, they are more likely to find common ground, compromise without feeling they're losing, or work towards a shared solution. And then you have the diffusing tension, okay? Lowering anger and frustrations. When people are angry, they often just want to be heard. Empathy is like a pressure release valve. It helps reduce hostility, defensiveness, and emotional escalation. So when people feel acknowledged, their anger decreases and their willingness to solve the problem increases, okay? So, how can we practice empathy in conflict resolution? Empathy isn't just about being nice, it's a skill you can develop. Here's how you can practice it in conflict situations. First, listen actively. Pay attention instead of thinking about what you're going to say next. Acknowledge emotions. Say things like, I see why this is being difficult for you. Ask clarifying questions. Can you help me understand what's upsetting you the most? Put yourself in their shoes. Imagine how you'd feel in their situation. For example, a mediator might ask, what do you think is the biggest issue here? What outcome would feel fair to you? These small shifts in communication can completely change the direction of conversation. So, recapping, empathy builds trust, empathy creates collaboration, and empathy reduces tension. When we understand each other, we stop fighting against each other and we start working towards the solution. Okay? So, on a final thought, empathy doesn't mean agreeing with someone, it means understanding them. It's different. Understanding versus agreement. You don't need to agree, but you can at least understand why they're saying that. And when people feel understood, they're more willing to listen, compromise, and move forward. The best mediators don't just resolve conflicts, they create spaces where people feel heard. Now, still on the emotional intelligence skills in mediation. Now, the social skills that help better communication, okay? So, can you mediate without strong social skills? Picture this. Two people are arguing and you step in as the mediator. One side is furious and the other is defensive. You try to help, but you stumble over your words. You don't know how to make them listen to each other. And you accidentally take sides without meaning to. Now, instead of solving the conflict, you're making it worse. Why? Because mediation is not just about logic, it's about communication, it's about emotions. And that's where the social skills come in. A great mediator is not just neutral and calm. They know how to guide conversations, de-escalate tension, and help people communicate effectively, okay? So, why are social skills crucial in mediation? Conflict resolution is about more than just finding a fair solution. If people don't feel heard, respected, and understood, they won't accept the outcome, even if it's technically fair. So that's why a mediator's social skills are just as important as their problem-solving ability, okay? The better your social skills, the better the mediation process. Social skills in mediation help with building trust, making both sides feel safe, encouraging cooperation, helping people work together, managing emotions, keeping discussions calm and productive, and finally ensuring clarity. making sure both sides understand each other. So think about it. If a mediator can communicate well, how can they help others do it? Think about a time when someone's social skills helped to resolve a conflict. What did they do to make the conversation smoother? There are 5 essential social skills for effective mediation: active listening, actually hearing what people are saying; clear and neutral expression, communicating in a way that's easy to understand; non-verbal communication awareness, using and reading body language effectively; emotional intelligence, understanding and managing emotions in the room; and building rapport and trust, creating a safe space for dialogue. So we've covered we've covered and explored each of these emotional intelligence skills. Now, bringing all them together, why does these social skills make or break mediation? Active listening, truly understanding both sides; clear and neutral expression, makes sure that communication is fair in a constructive way; the non-verbal communication awareness allows the mediator and even the involved parties reading between the lines; emotional intelligence allows managing emotions in the room; and building rapport and trust obviously creates a safe space for dialogue. Okay, so without these skills, mediation turns into just another argument. With them, you can guide people towards a real solution. So the mediator superpower is like they don't just resolve conflicts, okay? They help people communicate in ways they never have before. Because at the end of the day, the words we choose, the way we listen, how we react can make the difference between escalating a conflict or solving it. So a final thought. Mediation isn't about having all the answers, okay? It's about asking the right questions, listening in the right way, and creating the right space for solutions. So finally, what's the impact of effective conflict resolution? So why are we worried about resolving the conflicts? What happens when conflicts are resolved well? Think about the last time you had a productive conflict resolution experience. Maybe it was a tough conversation with a friend, or a challenging discussion at work, or even a simple disagreement at home. Well, maybe you were just starting the day shaving and thinking about whether putting on a red tie or a blue tie. So what happens when both sides listened, communicated, and compromised? Now compare that to a time when conflict was handled poorly. So maybe it escalated, was left unresolved, or damaged that relationship. The way we handle conflicts directly impacts our relationships, workplaces, and even our mental well-being. Today we'll explore the positive effects of effective conflict resolution and why mastering these skills is so important. So many people see conflict as something to avoid. We've covered that so far, but the truth is, conflict can be a tool for growth when handled correctly, okay? It strengthens relationships, it encourages teamwork, it helps us solve problems in a creative way, it reduces stress and improves our mental well-being, and it creates a culture of open communication and trust. So let's break these down, seeing how these 5 major benefits in more detail, okay? First, the strengthened relationship, turning conflicts into connections. So conflicts don't have to break relationships, okay? They actually can make them stronger. Why? Resolving conflicts build trust because both sides feel heard and respected. It encourages honest communication which strengthens the long-term connections, okay? It allows people to understand each other better, leading to deeper relationships. For example, A workplace disagreement resolved through open dialogue, making the team stronger instead of divided. A couple that has a difficult conversation but comes out feeling more connected than before. When conflicts are resolved constructively, relationships don't break, they grow. So think of a time when resolving a conflict actually strengthened your relationship with someone. What made that resolution successful? Now, about improved collaboration. This is creating teamwork instead of tension. Many people fear conflict because they think it will ruin relationships. But avoiding conflict often leads to bigger problems later, especially in teams and workplaces. Effective conflict resolutions encourage teamwork by helping teams navigate disagreements without hostility, allowing different perspectives to be heard, and encouraging mutual respect instead of competition. For example, a company team disagrees on project priorities. Instead of arguing, they use conflict resolution techniques to find common ground. That will lead to a stronger final plan. So collaboration is just like a group project, except on a collaboration, everyone actually does their part. Okay. So think: have you ever been in a situation when conflict actually made a team stronger? How did cooperation change the outcome? Now, what about enhanced problem solved? Conflict as a path to innovation. Some of the great innovation in history came from people challenging ideas and debating solutions. Conflict isn't always a bad thing, it often pushes us to think creatively, challenge outdated ideas, and find better solutions. For example, in a tech company, employees disagree on how to improve a product. Instead of ignoring the conflict, they brainstorm together and create a breakthrough innovation. A restaurant team argues about how to improve customer service, leading to a new policy that boosts customer satisfaction. So without conflict, we hardly would have any progress. So think about a time when a disagreement led to a better idea or solution. How did the conflict spark creativity? Okay, now let's go to reduced stress and tension. So this brings a healthier emotional environment. Unresolved conflicts don't just disappear, they turn into silent resentment, increased frustration, and a toxic environment. But when conflicts are resolved effectively, it reduces stress by helping people feel heard and understood, preventing built-up frustration, and encouraging a healthy, open environment. Some examples. A company with strong conflict resolution skills has less workspace drama and more productivity. A family that openly discusses issues experiences less emotional stress over time. So conflict resolution is like doing the dishes, you know. If you don't take care of it earlier, they'll just pile up and get worse. Okay? Think about a conflict you avoided for too long. Did the stress build up over time? How could addressing it earlier have helped? And positive organizational culture. So this is a workplace where people communicate openly. In organizations, conflict resolution isn't just a skill, it's a culture. When business, schools, and teams create an environment of open dialogue, they encourage honest discussions instead of gossip. They prevent long-term resentment from unresolved issues, and they build a culture of continuous learning and improvement. Some examples. A company that values open communication experiences higher employee satisfaction and lower turnover. A school that teaches students conflict resolution skills see a reduction in bullying and misunderstandings. When conflict is handled correctly, it becomes a tool for growth instead of a source of stress. So let's reflect on something. Have you ever worked or studied in an environment where people handled conflict well? What made it such a positive experience? So, bringing this all together, why conflict resolution matters. Uh, the strengthened relationship means that conflict can bring people close, not further apart. Improved collaboration, teamwork thrives when conflict is handled well. Enhanced problem solving, the disagreement actually sparks innovation. Reduced stress and tension, addressing conflicts early prevents resentment. And the positive organizational culture means that open communication creates a healthy environment, okay? Conflict is not the enemy. The real problem is how we handle it. So, how will you handle conflicts moving forward from this training? After everything we've covered, I leave you with this question. How will you handle conflicts differently from now on? Will you speak up earlier instead of avoiding issues? Will you listen with empathy instead of just trying to win? Or will you help others resolve conflict instead of letting it escalate? If we all apply these skills, we don't just become better conflict resolvers, we become better communicators, leaders, and problem solvers. Because at the end of the day, the way we handle conflict doesn't just affect arguments, it affects our relationships, our careers, and our overall well-being. I'll leave you with a final thought. Conflict resolution isn't just about avoiding disagreements. It's about learning how to turn them into opportunities for growth. Okay? So, thank you. As we wrap up, I want you to take a moment to thank you for your time, your focus, and your willingness to explore conflict resolutions in a deeper way. Okay, conflict is something that we will all encounter, whether in our personal lives, workspaces, or communities. But the way we handle it makes all the difference. By developing these skills, active listening, empathy, emotional intelligence, and mediation techniques, we're not just resolving conflict, we're building stronger relationships, creating more productive environments, and making the world a more understanding place. So thank you for being a part of this journey. What's the next step? So learning about conflict resolution is one thing, but applying it to what really makes a difference. So here's my challenge to you. Reflect on a past conflict. How could you have handled it differently? Apply what you've learned in this unit and apply it in your next disagreement. Can you listen more actively? Share these skills. Can you help mediate a conflict between others? So, conflict resolution isn't just a skill, it's a mindset. As you move forward, remember, every conflict is an opportunity for growth. Every conversation is a chance to listen and understand. Every challenge is a step toward becoming a better communicator. Let's not just learn about conflict resolution, let's use it to make it more to make our interactions and workplaces and communications better, okay? Hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. See you next time.